Hi guys, welcome to the Unalived podcast, where we discuss all things murder and true crime. I'm your host, Lala, and I have an unbelievable case for you today. We've all seen the Scream movie franchise, right? For my horror fanatics like myself, this movie franchise is seriously a classic. So how did I not know there was an actual murder inspired by it? Let's dive into it. This is the murder of Cassie Jo Stoddart. Cassie was born December 21st, 1989 in Pocatello, Idaho. She was your typical 16-year-old. A junior at Pocatello High School, her friends said she was a very free spirit, someone who loved to dance and draw, and she was very full of life. It was Thursday, September 22nd, 2006, and 16-year-old Cassie had agreed to house sit for her uncle's family while they were out of town. I know what you're thinking. 16, house sit. I know this sounds terrifying to some parents, including myself. But Cassie's mom wasn't really worried. Cassie was super responsible and a very smart girl, and she knew she'd be okay. So around 3:45 p.m., Cassie's mom picked her up and her steady boyfriend, Matt Beckham, from school. Matt was planning to go over and watch some movies with Cassie and keep her company. Around 5:30 p.m., she dropped both kids off to the empty house. The plan was a very chill night of relaxation and movies. No crazy high school party. Although her boyfriend did invite two of their classmates over to chill. 16-year-old Brian Draper and Tori Adamick. Somewhere between 7 and 8 p.m. the boys arrived. Cassie, trying to be a good host, gave the guys a tour of the house before they all settled in to watch a movie in the living room. The movie of the night, Kill Bill Volume 2. Also a classic. Everyone got settled in to watch this one on the couch and everyone was having a good time. But Brian and Tori decided to leave. They wanted to go catch a movie at the theater instead. So it was just Cassie and Matt left. Or so they thought. But they never left. Instead, the boys parked around the corner, switched into all black, and waited. What Cassie didn't realize was during the tour of the home, one of the boys had unlocked the basement door. This is where they planned to re-enter the home when the time was right. After some time, the boys quietly entered the house through the basement door. Matt and Cassie were watching television in the living room. In the basement, they intentionally made loud noises in an unsuccessful attempt to lure the couple downstairs so they could scare them. But the couple never came. So they upped the ante. They found the circuit breaker and turned the power off in the house, hoping Matt would come downstairs to check the breaker. But he didn't come. After some time, the boys turned the lights back on. So their scare attempts clearly weren't working by this point. Which honestly, if I was house sitting for someone and I heard the noises and the lights went off, I don't think I'd be so willing to go check what's going on either. Cassie, by this point, was, however, extremely freaked out. Matt had noticed one of the dogs sitting, looking at the door to the basement and growling. So Matt called his mom to see if it was okay if he spent the night there. His mom wasn't having it. But she did offer for Cassie to come over to their house. Cassie declined. She committed to house sitting, so she decided she needed to stay and see it out. Matt's mom came to pick him up around 10:30 p.m. From the basement, Brian and Tori heard Matt leave. The teens turned the lights off again and the circuit breaker and waited, hoping Cassie would come downstairs to turn the lights back on. But she didn't. Eventually, the boys just decided to go upstairs. Brian opened and slammed the closet door in the top of the stairs to scare Cassie, who was lying on the couch in the living room. The boys then brutally attacked her, stabbing her approximately 30 times. 12 wounds were potentially fatal. She died immediately. Her body was discovered a day later when her aunt and uncle returned home. Her 13-year-old cousin actually stumbled upon her body in the living room. Blood was everywhere. It was clear Cassie had put up a fight. Her aunt frantically called the police, but it was too late. Idaho State Police rushed to the scene where they found Cassie's lifeless body laying on the floor. Investigators who were put on the case quickly tried to backtrack Cassie's final days. They found surveillance video of her at school and talked to select classmates. This just further confused investigators. There was no clear motive, as Cassie had been well liked in school and didn't have any enemies. So they began looking into people in their life, starting with the last person to see her alive, her boyfriend, Matt. Investigators were actually the one to break the news to him about his girlfriend's death, which most of us would consider horrifying, but Matt didn't show any emotion. I know we all handle grief differently, but it left investigators feeling very suspicious of him, which I always hate the stigma that we're supposed to act a certain way once we hear news of someone passing. Different people react in different ways. But I digress. So they gave Matt a polygraph, which he passed with flying colors. But it's what Matt said after that broke this case wide open. Matt told detectives that on the night Cassie died, two of their other friends, Brian and Tori, had also briefly been at the house. So they brought the boys in for a few questions. They told detectives they left because they had decided to go to a movie. But curiously, neither was able to describe what the movie was actually about. An employee at the movie theater, who just so happened to go to school with the boys, also said that certainly they both had not been at the theater that night because he didn't see them. Investigators knew at this point they were lying, but the question was more so, why? Investigators called Brian back for a few additional questions, but he stuck to his story. They set Brian up to take a polygraph test, but before the test began, he became extremely emotional and said he needs to speak to detectives. As his parents sat in the room with him, Brian recanted how he and Tori had gone back to the home that night to turn off the power and try to scare Cassie, wearing masks to disguise their identity. But he claimed he was surprised when Tori started actually stabbing her for real. Brian eventually led detectives to an area near Black Rock Canyon where the two teens had buried evidence from the crime. And it was then that investigators discovered that the murder had been much more sinister than they thought. Inspired by horror movies like Scream, Brian and Tori had decided to create their real-life version, targeting Cassie for the simple reason that they knew she'd be house-sitting alone. This was all planned. These two even recorded a videotape that was playing at their trial in which they stated, "We're 6 psychopaths who get pleasure out of killing other people." One of the teens happily said at even the point in the video, "We want to be just like Scream." Which, if you think about it, explains a lot of their actions that night. Hiding in the home, just like Billy and Stu. Cutting the circuit breaker, just like the party scene with Rose McGowan. Investigators believe they would have killed Matt as well, but he got picked up by his parents, leaving Cassie as their sole victim. These two were convicted of first-degree murder and received a mandatory sentence of life imprisonment without any possibility of parole, and 30 years to life for conspiracy to murder. As per prison records, both of them remain incarcerated at the Idaho State Correctional Institution. Alright guys, that's it for me today. Make sure that you like and subscribe. I will be back with more murder. Thanks for listening.